Okay. Yep. That's a lot better and less choppy. Okay. 1 second while I move things around and make sure it's how I like it. Hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome to my book club. Vampires are my special interest book club. Normally we start around 6 Eastern Standard Time, but I had a little issue with my computer. Hopefully, getting the cat hair out of it helped. You gotta clean that thing, man. You can't just clean it once a year and then go like Pikachu's shocked face when it breaks on you. Oh god. Yeah. Knock on wood that it doesn't go crazy, because chances are I'm not gonna notice until it's over. So, I believe I changed the thumbnail. I should have. If not, my bad. But I figured we normally read on this channel vampire anthologies, short story book collections. We are perfectly in the middle of one called Dracula's Brood. And I just wanted to change things up for a week and take a mid-book break and do something else that I find fun. You know, was it stimulation in your cage or whatever? The tiger in the cage needs enrichment, so I wanted to do something fun. Not that the other stuff isn't fun, but yeah, enrichment. And my version of fun is reading literary journals, and I thought, why not take a stab at Twilight? Let's see what JSTOR has to say about Twilight. I already downloaded quite a few articles. Not that many. There's surprisingly not as many as I expected there to be, considering Twilight, the saga, was such a phenomenon like 10 years ago, you know? Because, like, not only do you have the books to discuss, but you have the movies. You would think people would want to delve into that and analyze it more. I only found a couple. It might be the search parameters, but I think looking up Stephenie Meyer, the author, should have cleared that out. Because people would at least go, you know, Twilight by Stephenie Meyer, not Twilight by... and then some random fucking... who knows? What am I saying? Oh, Medusa. You're starting this early, huh? Come here. That's what we're gonna do for like an hour and a half. Not too long. Sorry, I started late again. And sorry if this little one screams a lot. She loves attention. She loves screaming at me until she gets her food early. Okay. Let's start. Let's see. Is the setup okay? Nice. Okay. I organized them by size. So the first one, I don't know if it counts as a literary journal, because just the way it looks doesn't look very like a giant photo in the middle, you know what I mean? But screw it, whatever. Let's see. This one, our first one, is called Unsafe Sex, Romancing the Vampire by Karen Backstein. In the horror universe, the popularity of vampires never seems to die. This makes sense. Forever young and beautiful. Oh, wait. Hold on. Let me bring something up real quick. Okay. Right. This makes sense. Forever young and beautiful they are, as Twilight's Edward Cullen points out in his Inamorata, Bella, specifically designed to be irresistible to humans. But if the greatest and most filmed of literary bloodsuckers, Count Dracula, served as a warning about what would happen to the pure Victorian woman who succumbed to the lure of the mercurial and seductive man, the contemporary vampire often is a very different figure altogether. Just as the eternally living creature within the narrative must adapt to the passing construction of the protagonist, has had to shift in order to survive as a meaningful symbol for audiences with modern sensibilities. Across every medium, from books to films to television, today's vampire, at least that particular type of vampire who serves as the narrative's male lead and the heroine's love interest, has transformed into an alluring combination of danger and sensitivity, a handsome romantic hero haunted by his lust for blood and his guilt for the humans he killed in the past. No bats, no capes, and perhaps just a touch of white pallor to provide a whiff of the grave. The black vampire remains a rarity in mainstream texts. And so much the better if he shimmers in the manner of Twilight's Edward and resembles an Armani model. He's often courtly, too, in the fashion of another age. The age, in fact, when he was born and lived as a human before being made. At the same time, the vampire's power can never be underestimated. The very notion of devouring and eating someone is redolent of sex, and in some cases rape, and he could have what he wants for the taking. When we taste human blood, Edward hesitatingly says, a sort of frenzy begins. But he has now become too evolved and moral to engage in that frenzy. I don't want to be a monster. In part, the modern vampire story is one about self-control, about man struggling to master his worst impulses, perhaps even his essential nature, through whatever means necessary, be it with synthetic substances, true blood, or by finding other sources of food, twilight. In an almost Victorian ethos, this civilizing impulse is strengthened by the arrival of the heroine, who cements the vampire's determination not to succumb to his bloodthirst. To further stress the point, a bad vampire usually throws the hero's chivalrousness into relief. Twilight's vicious and murderous tracker James contrasts with Edward, while True Blood juxtaposes the gentlemanly Bill Compton with the imperious and manipulative, but equally sexy, Eric Northman. The Vampire Diaries has two divergent brothers, and Buffy had Angel and Spike. But the complex qualities of the hero, his mix of sex and sensibility, is not the only reason women seem to have such an insatiable appetite for vampires today. Another attraction may be the point of view these texts adopt. They are female-centered narratives that strive for audience identification with the heroine, with her strength, her extraordinary capabilities, her status as an object of desire, or a combination of these traits. She is the focus of the story, whether she's narrating it, Twilight, or the active visual center of this screen image, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, True Blood. Apart from the pioneering works of Anne Rice, who a while ago set aside Lestat and company in favor of Jesus anyway, many of these modern vampire narratives have been directed primarily to teen females and spotlight young heroines, perhaps all the better to stand out against their centuries-old paramours. Twilight, True Blood, and The Vampire Diaries, to name but a few, all have their origins in young adult novels aimed specifically at girls. They then crossed over to capture a huge audience of older women who lapped up their gothic atmosphere, dreamy heroes, and romantic focus. True Blood, in particular, is pure Southern Gothic that moved into adult mode in its TV incarnation, with its graphic sex scenes and its use of the vampire to signify the other. Imagining a world wherein artificial blood allows vampires to live among us without feeding, the series plays with the idea of interspecies mixing as miscegenation, a metaphor that encompasses sexual fear and potency as well as a social critique. Vampire Bill Compton is literally a refugee from the Civil War when he was brought over, and the credits feature assorted images from the Old South, including a Klansman. Despite their dissimilarities, varied approaches to the construction of vampire life and rules, all these supernatural stories are driven largely by female desire in the female voice. The virginal Victorian ladies of Dracula may have needed Jonathan Harker to tell their tale no longer. Ever since Buffy the Vampire Slayer came on the scene, the ladies have spoken for themselves. This is not to say that vampire narratives are necessarily feminist. Their degree of girl power varies, with Buffy perhaps the strongest, rarely in need of rescue and able to slay multiple neck-biters with a single kick and knife thrust, and master them romantically too. A point wittily made in fan-created viral videos that juxtaposed shots of Buffy at her fiercest with images of a dreamy, clearly smitten, and physically passive Edward from Twilight. Rolling her eyes at his persistent advances, the buffster resisted his charms and killed. Like Buffy, singled out among all girls as the one in her generation to be the slayer, Suki in True Blood is not quite human, possessing extra-normal skills, including the ability to read minds and a strange kind of electral energy that sometimes flows from her hands. She sidesteps that many lures that drag down her fellow townsfolk, family, and friends. But no heroine and no relationship seems to have enthralled female readers and spectators like that of Bella and Edward in the Twilight Saga. Unlike much of the horror genre, Twilight, both the book and the film, is the product of women: novelist Stephanie Meyer, screenwriter Melissa Rosenberg, and director Catherine Hardwicke. Hardwicke was replaced by Chris Weitz for the sequel, New Moon, a more male-focused and presumably more action-centered narrative in which Bella cedes some of the spotlight to the Native American character Jacob. Oh, God. A werewolf. The removal of Hardwicke is particularly fascinating for Hollywood watchers, given the box office success of Twilight, over $70 million the first weekend, as compared to the critical and financial disaster that was Weitz's Golden Compass. I didn't realize the person who made Golden Compass made the sequel to New Moon. Why would that is such an that is fascinating. I remember people freaking hated the Golden Compass. They liked the TV show. They hated the movie. Why would they give that over to some guy who failed? That's such a good point. That's so weird. It would be impossible to overestimate the popularity of the novels. At a time when the publishing industry is collapsing, sales of Meyer's books played a huge role in ensuring the financial health of Little Brown, Twilight's publishing house. As was the case when the final Harry Potter tome came out, bookstores stayed open at midnight on its release day, hosting parties to draw in readers eager to get their hands on the next installment as soon as possible. When casting for the movie adaptation was announced, its unknown leads became instant celebrities, and the film, not unexpectedly, was a blockbuster too. Despite the fact that Twilight is remarkably poorly written and astonishingly repetitive, clearly Meyer has her finger on the pulse of young female America. I was a humongous fan. Can you believe that when I was a teenage girl, I was a humongous fan of Twilight? Can you believe that? Crazy, right? I was like directly in the demographic and I loved it. And I was, obsessed. I think it's an interesting point to be like relatively unknown actors, but like when you were in the fandom, you like knew, oh, he's from Harry Potter, and I kind of knew her around. I knew her around from various projects that she was doing. She's always been an indie darling. Like I know she did Speak, which was a big deal to me because I loved that book. I think I've maybe seen the movie once. It's not a bad movie. I just loved the book more. But yeah, no. I don't even know what I'm saying. Just like these people nobody knows. Meanwhile, I'm like a huge nerd, and I'm like, yeah, but he's Cedric, and she's the girl from Speak and like Panic Room or something. I know these people. Yeah, maybe you know these people because you're insane and obsessive. Twilight tells the story of Bella Swan, a teenager who reluctantly leaves. Twilight tells the story of Bella Swan, a teenager who reluctantly leaves her home in sunny Phoenix to come to the gray and rainy climes of Forks, Washington, where her father is sheriff. The move is nothing less than a sacrifice prompted by her mother's remarriage. Bella generously gives her mom the space, time, and freedom to travel with her new husband as he pursues his career. Almost immediately upon her arrival, however, Bella, formerly an outsider, finds herself the center of attention at school with a group of friends and plenty of male interest. But her eye is drawn irresistibly to Edward Cullen and his 4 sisters and brothers, all startlingly beautiful and supremely standoffish. Bella is shocked when Edward initially reacts to her presence with pure, overt hostility. The truth will out, however, when she discovers that his coldness was just a ploy. He is so deeply drawn to her and so scared he might harm her in the throes of passion that he tries to resist his feelings. For Edward and his entire family are vampires, albeit vampires who wish to live peacefully with humans, and this love appears star-crossed. Bella and Edward's relationship grows ever more passionate, but always with Edward attempting to make Bella feel a healthy sense of fear at what he is. The true danger, however, comes in the form of a different group of neckbiters, including a tracker, who hunts down humans forever until he catches the prey he wants, and he wants Bella. Why have female audiences of all ages so embraced the series, both on the page and on screen? Why, like the character of Edward Cullen himself, has it proven so irresistible? And how do both hero and heroine differ from their vampire/human counterparts? And what do those differences mean? First, although vampire stories generally fall within horror, and Twilight has its share of blood and violence, in many ways it has just as much in common with the romance novel, except for a paranormal twist. Other than his fondness for the taste of blood, Edward is the perfect, dark, brooding, romantic hero, tormented by his past, and so protective of the woman he loves that he willingly pushes her away for her own good. Only he happens to have extra vampire powers to help him safeguard the woman better, and to make him even more compelling to viewers. As with any romantic hero, Edward's worth has to be established within the narrative, which measures him against both vampire and man, and eventually werewolf, in order to validate him as a singular figure in force in any world. On the human side are Bella's male schoolmates, almost all with a crush on her, and all boyish and immature in contrast to Edward, who, of course, is many years older than them. Sweet and welcoming, into sports and the prom, they represent a normalcy Edward can never have. They also are roundly rejected as boyfriend material for by Bella, who gently guides them instead to more appropriate girls. I should have brought a fidget toy, but then I think the noise would be annoying because, like, the ones I like make clacky noises. Also human are the men who try to rape Bella one evening in town. In the book, which is actually scarier than the film's depiction of it, they slyly herd a lost Bella to an abandoned cul-de-sac where she has no hope of escape. In the movie, Bella first glimpses 2 young men at the end of an alleyway after she emerges from a bookstore at night. Apprehensively, she heads in the opposite direction, but the pair chase her to a clearing. There, they and a group of drunken friends surround and menace her. As the camera turns slowly around the leering circle of men, a series of jump cuts follows the tormentors' movements as they close in on Bella. Just as she finally tries to defend herself, Edward zooms up in his car, wheels squealing, to act as her savior. The implication is clear. Not all dangers come from the paranormal. That the scene is lit to have the same gray-green mistiness as ones featuring several vampire-caused murders further links the human and the undead. Additionally, this almost rape by flesh-and-blood males acts as a mirror image to James's even more sadistic abduction of Bella, both in its elaborate entrapment and Edward's rescue operation. Both these sequences stand out in this otherwise romantic movie for their terror, explicit threat to Bella's body, and dependence on male physical violence. After luring Bella in, James presses up against her, stroking her hair, adding a sexual element to the kidnapping. Unlike the earlier sequence, a long time elapses before Edward arrives, and the brutalization is visualized. When Bella tries to escape, James flies to intercept her, using techniques familiar to fans of martial arts films. The surface grace of his airborne trajectory contrasts with Bella's body, which goes into flight in a different way, by being thrown. The crack of her fragile little human bones is audible, and James films it all to torment Edward in what is one of Twilight's several interesting and negative references to still and movie cameras in relation to women. While the vampire, in almost every artistic incarnation, symbolizes impossible desire and transgressed boundaries, the romantic idea that sex equals death, Twilight shifts the paradigm in interesting ways. Twilight's operative equation is love equals death, which Bella reaffirms in a voiceover at the start, a ghostly reference to a later point in the story when she expects to die. The gentlemanly Edward not only refuses sex because of the danger to Bella, he also swoops in to pluck her out of sexually threatening situations. In fact, as we've seen, whenever someone in Twilight does want sex or cannot control his desires, he is evil. Twilight makes an argument for abstemious love. No surprise given that the story sprung from the pen of a Mormon writer. On a day when the romance novel is packed with explicit, semi-pornographic depictions of bedroom activities far beyond the old-fashioned bodice ripper, Twilight harks back to a time when sexual attraction was implied, not acted upon. In this regard, Bella stands apart from such heroines as Buffy and Suki, who consummate both human and vampire relationships. There is perhaps a touch of Heathcliff and Katherine in Edward and Bella, an affirmation of a powerful love that transcends the limits of human life. For young readers especially, there may be a kind of safety in a story that steers clear of perilous sexual territory and that suggests gazing into one another's eyes and holding hands are the most sublime joys. At the same time, however, the narrative is packed with sexual substitutes, so the vampire retains his potency even if he pulls back. It is always clear that when the time comes, and it does in later novels, that sex is permissible, he will be the perfect lover. Perhaps the book, a little more than the film, overtly emphasizes the power of Edward's vampiric touch and kiss, which induces an almost orgasmic reaction in Bella, who faints. Nevertheless, the film finds its stand-in for Meyer's physical descriptions in a soaringly romantic cinematic style. Manipulation of motion becomes one of the movie's hallmarks, a slowing down or hastening of time, most notably to capture Edward's vampire super speed, but also to indicate perceptual awareness, self-consciousness, and even grace. In lengthy, wordless, and lushly scored sequences, cameras circle the Pacific Northwest landscape from up high, flying with Bella and Edward as he carries her up trees and cliffs, or looking down upon them lying in the grass. His near magical powers and his speed, his ability to bring her into a different world, imply sexuality, skill, and thrill, enhanced by the vertiginous patterns traced by the cinematography. And a large percentage of the audience comes armed with the knowledge of the written text, which will influence their reading of the cinematic images. Twilight the novel is told almost exclusively from Bella's perspective, which the film to some extent replicates through her voiceovers placed throughout, as well as through the use of point of view. It is Bella who first sees the Cullens through the slats of the school windows, moving in graceful slow motion, outdoor light falling on them. "Who is that?" she asks. Edward's glance only later meets her originating gaze. With him, she is rarely the looked at, but the one doing the looking, or an equal in an exchange of glances, except at night, when Edward sneaks in simply to watch her sleep. But we only see that when she wakes suddenly and catches him, so we never share his point of view of her vulnerable body. And not only does the camera work emphasize Edward as visual object through lingering shots, but actor Robert Pattinson, a former model, assumes the photographic poses and runway walks of a self-aware performer. Even when we know he is looking at her because of an eyeline match, he stays the visual object for the audience. The usual paradigm of female viewed / male viewer has shifted thoroughly, especially as Bella makes clear how much she despises being the center of attention when under the curious stares of her fellow students. In one of the most telling scenes, students mill about in front of the school, and Angela, a photographer and Bella's friend, aims her camera at something we cannot see. "Oh my God," she exclaims, lowering it, and we cut to a classy sports car from which Bella and Edward emerge. Pattison plays it with the enigmatic smile of a model or movie star on the red carpet who knows all eyes are on him. "Well, everyone's staring," Stewart's unsmiling Bella points out, and we cut to her point of view. As the camera moves forward into the crowd, the scene alternates between normal and slow motion, as if emphasizing the sense of unreality Bella feels. In fact, Bella is defined through scent more than look, a more difficult quality to convey visually, hence the constant verbal allusions to her smell. But when she walks into her science classroom, where she will be seated next to Edward, she steps in front of a fan, again as slowly as the Cullens strode into the lunchroom where Bella first glimpsed them. The wind ruffles her hair, and the film cuts to Edward as the paper on the desk in front of him sharply blows as her Bella aroma reaches his nose. His body quivers, and his hand reaches up to cover his nose and face. When the scene cuts back to Bella, still standing in front of the room, her smile fades. This scene repeats, to more ominous effect, when the wind blows through her hair, when James and his more vicious vampires meet Bella. Hiding among Edward's family, the breeze alerts him to a human presence. The vampire's effect on his victim has always been one of transformation, but a negative one. The draining of blood, the draining of energy, the draining of life. Twilight, unlike its predecessors, tells a story of transformation in a more positive sense. While it has elements of horror, particularly near the end of James's attack, it more closely resembles a fairy tale, Bella and the Beast, if you will, with elements of Cinderella. At the start of the story, Bella comes to the town of Forks without ever having had a boyfriend, and indeed having had few friends at all. Sorry. I must have just blinked and just the lighting changed for a second, and it must have just been my brain refreshing. What was that even? Goodness, she's never had many friends at all. But in this new territory, she turns into a central object of desire for every man, and finds her beast, who is really a prince in disguise. Like a fairy tale heroine, her qualities are innate, not just the beauty that's de rigueur, but even her smell, which shocks Edward into submission and draws the deadly attention of James. And as in a fairy tale, all females are secondary to her, helpmates whose own interior lives remain obscure. Given this generic shift, it is logical that the vampire hero is moved out of the night and into the light, not just able to see the sun, but also to sparkle brilliantly in it. Twilight, as a film, rejects expressionist or neo-noir style. It is not a film of jagged angles or darkness, but of fog and the mossy, hazy green of the northwestern forest. Water, mountains, and majestic trees form the backdrop for Bella and Edward's intimate talks, substituting for the moors that Heathcliff and Kathy wandered. Vampires have homes, not coffins, and because they are not limited to sundown, the night is no more threatening than the day. Bella, though a figure who can articulate her desire, becomes an object in need of protection, this time by the vampire rather than from him. Edward rescues his princess from careening cars, a roving band of human rapists, and a vampire who hunts his prey without cease. Ultimately, what Edward would most like to save her from is himself, the one task where he cannot succeed. Fun. What was that? Zoomed in. Unsafe sex, romancing the vampire, Karen Backstein. I think that was a really good way of putting it, actually. Thinking back to being a teenager and, let's see, I don't remember the, shush. Oh my god, okay, come here. Well, come here. I'm trying to talk about vampires, baby. You can just cry at me. Come here. Come here. Hush. Anyway. I don't remember the, like, order in which I read these things too long ago, but I was definitely into paranormal romance. I don't think I really strayed into the adult section of it until, like, my friends convinced me to. I was definitely more interested in people my age. Like, I mean, there's, I'm trying to remember author names. I haven't thought of her in a while, but she had a lot. Like, her first book she published was when she was like 13 or something. Vampires. Young adult. Anita? No. See if we can find her. I used to have these names memorized. Oh, Amelia Atwater Rhodes. There we go. Yeah, I was really into her work because she had multiple, not just of vampires. I know there's a lot of witches, demon-y types. The one was literally called Demon in My Window, I think. Yeah, like, there are these things that can hurt you and like hurting you and like hurting people in general, but they see you specifically, the main character, but also you pretending to be the main character, you know, avatar thing, and like they don't want to hurt you. You're the special one. I loved that. I wanted to be the special one. I wanted to be the one they didn't want to hurt. So they didn't care about anyone else. Not particularly healthy, but hey, I wasn't a particularly mentally healthy child. I had a lot happening. I don't know what the vampire paranormal genre looks like these days. I'm assuming it's pretty empty. You know, I mean, like, things being currently published, not... Like, the library got really big when Twilight went off, and a whole bunch of people wrote a whole bunch of vampire stories. Fair enough. But it's been, like, what, 10, 15 years now? So, again, I wonder what's going on over there, and if we're less, this vampire doesn't want to hurt you, or for more like, this vampire is just kind of chill in general. It's just a chill little monster, you know? A chill little monster who doesn't want to hurt anyone at all and just thinks you're neat and wants to kiss you on Halloween, you know? Like, oh gosh, did I just say goosh? Kind of like, oh god, oh, what were they called? It was like Vampire Kisses was the first one. I have a copy. I was thinking of reading it for, on this channel, but come here, Medusa. You're only quiet when I'm holding you. You're such a little shit. What was I saying? It's like Ellen Schreider or something. Shriner. Vampire Kisses. There's like 6 of them. And it was just like this goth girl being like, my family doesn't like that I'm goth, but it's who I am. This isn't a phase, Mom. And then she'd like flirt with the kid who was bullying her, and then eventually she met her vampire, and he's just like a chill dude who drinks blood and doesn't want to hurt anyone and think it's neat that she's goth and wants to kiss her on Halloween. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next thing, because I've ran out of random tangents that may or may not be related. Okay. Stop. Sit here. Be cute. Be quiet. Children should be quiet. Children should be seen and not heard, and preferably not seen. Oh, I ran out of treats to give her. I need to get more. They never really worked, but I always wanted them to work. I just called them her calm down treats. The last collection I had a little bit of CBD in them, which I think cats are fine with. Like, nobody's ever told me they can't give them to cats. They only kind of worked, but it was better than just ripping my hair out, wishing she would be quiet for an hour. The act of giving her one was calming for me. This has nothing to do with Twilight, does it? You little shithead. I shouldn't say my baby voice on the internet. That's embarrassing. Pretend I didn't say any of that. Okay. Book of Mormon stories that Steph Meyer tells to me. LDS themes in the Twilight Saga and the Host by Jana Reese, and this is more of a review essay. Publishing professionals call it a phenomena. In 2008, Little Brown sold 27.5 million copies of Stephenie Meyer's 4 vampire novels. The Twilight movie grossed $191 million in domestic box office sales, and Meyer's adult novel, The Host, sold an additional 1 million copies. Publishers Weekly crowed, "A new queen has been crowned." USA Today reported that Meyer was the best-selling author in the world for the year 2008, accounting for 1 in 5 of the books sold from Thanksgiving to Christmas. It's not bad for an author who, as the media incessantly reminds us, is little more than a Mormon housewife. It seems that nearly every major article about Meyer's success has focused on this label, as though Mormon housewives constitute a group of whom little can be reasonably expected. Time magazine called her a Mormon housewife turned novelist. Wow. Entertainment Weekly trumpeted the fact that back in 2003, Meyer had been a 29-year-old Mormon housewife who was mystified by the rarefied world of New York publishing and was merely a member of a cozy, supportive women's writing group. Dang it. Before being plucked from obscurity by a New York agent. The Time profile, in fact, went out of its way to attest to Meyer's literary inexperience. Meyer has not written anything much before then. Her main creative outlets were scrapbooking and making elaborate Halloween costumes. For the record, Meyer studied English literature at Brigham Young University, wrote some, and read widely before having her famous dream that birthed Edward Cullen, a byronic but noble vampire. The media would prefer to have Meyer's pre-Twilight world intellectually limited because it makes for a better story. To that end, they have revived the term housewife instead of using today's far more common and less provincial phrase, stay-at-home mom. The persistence of the housewife image says a good deal less about contemporary Mormonism than it does about what Americans believe about Mormonism. If the media cannot get the major facts of Meyer's own story straight, it is not surprising that journalists have missed a good deal of the theological underpinnings of her work. While Mormon themes are mentioned at all, when they are explicitly tied to sexual abstinence to the exclusion of all else. That is not to say that sexuality is not a hugely important element of Twilight, or indeed of all vampire fiction. Vampirism is nearly always a literary stand-in for eroticism, and falling in love with a vampire is the pinnacle of forbidden fruit. But the media's focus on the steamy but restrained sexuality of the Twilight series, equating Mormonism with the fact that Bella and Edward do not have intercourse until marriage, misses the richest connections between LDS theology and Meyer's writing. At least The Atlantic recognized this tendency and grieved it. In Caitlin Flanagan's brilliant article about the Twilight Saga's commercial appeal, she noted that, although every reviewer had made mentions of Meyer's Mormonism, none knows what to do with it, and certainly none can relate it to the novel. Oh, I wanna read that little that little citation. Remember, someone remind me, 7. Look up 7. Meyer has publicly declared the Book of Mormon to be the book that has made the most significant impact on her life. A careful reading of her fiction attests to the reality of this statement. It is not just window dressing or pious platitude. Meyer's theology is impressionistic and not systematic, and it is always embedded within story, very much like in the Book of Mormon itself, yet it is clearly discernible. One of the most important theological aspects of the Twilight series is its emphasis on what the Book of Mormon would term overcoming the natural man. This phrase crops up throughout LDS scripture as a reflection on sin and redemption. To understand this term, we have to go back to the first parents, Adam and Eve. The specific transgression that resulted in their exile and the fall of humanity stemmed from the desire to become like God. The Book of Mormon's unique twist on traditional Judeo-Christian theology ties their proactive decision to partake of the forbidden fruit to their desire for procreation. The Book of Mormon also makes the audacious claim that the pair chose to give up mere immortality for the chance of eternal life in relationship with God, each other, and future children. As a result of their choice, their life in the fallen world would be a struggle, and human nature would become something to transcend. In Twilight, the problem of a carnal, sinful nature is embodied and symbolized by the figure of Edward. His sole purpose in life, well, death, is to feed on human blood, to be literally carnal and carnivorous. Edward, encouraged by his foster father, Carlisle, my God, look at all that fur, damn. Ugh, ugh. I do not have a trash can near me. Encouraged by his foster father, Carlisle, makes the decision to reject this way of life for a better, more difficult one. He makes this choice on a daily basis, and the temptation is always strong, especially when a new girl shows up at high school whose blood sings to him. I'm going to interrupt myself to just say, just real quick, I had a friend back when these movies were still being released who is a lesbian, and she was in love with Carlisle. She was just like, he's so handsome. I don't feel this way about any other guy. Something about Carlisle just really gets to me. It was so funny. I was like, more of a not like other girls, this thing that I love I now hate kind of like, I don't want to see this movie. I'm better than them. I'm better than the books that I was in love with 2 years ago. But I ended up going to see, like, I believe the last movie in theaters because she was in love with the actor who played Carlisle. Doesn't matter. Random little tidbit about life. Moving on. Mormonism teaches that the natural human stands in opposition to Christ. The natural person is selfish, whereas Christ is selfless. The natural person is carnal, whereas Christ is incarnational. And Mosiah 3:19, King Benjamin expresses it this way: "For the natural man is an enemy to God, and has been from the fall of Adam, and will be forever and ever, unless he yields to the enticings of the Holy Spirit, and putteth off the natural man, and becometh a saint through the atonement of Christ the Lord, and becometh as a child, submissive, meek, humble, patient, full of love, willing to submit to all things which the Lord seeth fit to inflict upon him, even as a child doth submit to his father." Checking my body, checking to see if I'm on flames for reading a tidbit from the Bible. No, okay. In the Book of Mormon, the term natural man is not employed just to describe the wicked or the immoral, but anyone prone to the human condition of alienation from God. It is a description of the absence of relationship, not a tidy pejorative statement about immortality. It is disarmingly universal. In Twilight, Edward is able, through sheer willpower and a desire to do no harm, to subdue his monstrous nature and avoid preying on humans for many decades. But it is not until Bella comes into his life that he is transformed by love, and he makes efforts to become like the children he calls his senior high classmates. Saying that he becomes submissive and meek is a stretch. In fact, his behavior is often mercurial and inscrutable. But what changes fundamentally for Edward is the new desire to live wholly for another. As he tells Bella, "You are my life now." In Twilight, Edward's self-control goes a long way toward throwing off the natural man, but it is Bella, working as a kind of Christ figure, who becomes a vehicle of grace in Edward's transformation. Her determination that he does indeed possess a soul goes a long way toward convincing him that he does. Her trust in his nobility, in turn, generates in him a new confidence that he is worthy of her trust and that he can withstand unthinkable temptation. Choice and accountability are crucial values here, not just for Edward and Bella, but her friend Jacob as well. When Bella and Jacob get in a heated argument about Jacob's werewolf nature, Bella spits the retort, "It's not what you are, stupid, it's what you do." She is telling Jacob that he does not have to act on any natural inclinations a werewolf might have to destroy or to feed. He is free. In the Book of Mormon, right choices pave the way for receiving Christ's atonement, which is the way for our escape from the grasp of this awful monster. Ye, that monster, death and hell, which I call the death of the body and also the death of the spirit. I don't even know how to read that little citation. Just as important for Meyer, love saves us from the monster within. In the Book of Mormon, Alma teaches that mortality is a probationary state, during which humankind strives to overcome its evil nature. But in Twilight, such testing happens in immortality as well, calling attention to a second major Mormon theme, the basic but subtle Mormon distinction between immortality and eternal life. The vampires in Twilight represent some of the less savory aspects of immortality. Not being mortal means not being subject to death, and in the case of Meyer's vampires, it also means certain enhancements in the form of supernatural strength and speed, acute hearing, or clairvoyance. But immortality, with all its perks, is not a gift to be envied. There is loneliness, restlessness to the Cullen family. They are isolated from their kind by their decision to become the vampiric equivalent of vegetarians and are doomed to roam the earth as inconspicuously as possible, which precludes close relationships with humans. There is a flatness, an eternal sameness to this life, symbolized most prominently by the vampire's inability to procreate. Carlisle and Esme cannot have children, and Rosalie, Edward's adoptive sister, knows that her greatest longing in life, to have a baby, will never come to pass. This reality causes her deep bitterness, especially when she sees Bella so ready to blithely throw away her precious human life and her ability to become a mother. But in the fourth installment of the saga, Bella gets to have it all: motherhood of a unique child, superhuman strength and immortality, and a perfect soulmate in Edward, and she can enjoy these blessings for eternity. Here the series' love story trips over something more substantial, a rumination on the social context of eternal life. In Mormonism, eternal life includes the promise of a resurrected, perfect body, which Bella receives when she gives her life to save her child. Meyer is careful to show that Bella does not throw over her precious humanity merely to be with Edward or to stay young forever. In a crisis, she gives herself up to save another, typifying Christ's teaching that greater love hath no man than this, than a man lay down his life for his friends. Bella then enters a post-resurrection world, and she brings her husband and daughter with her. Mormon beliefs about bodily resurrection do not differ markedly from those of Orthodox Christianity. The distinctions are more a matter of degree. Almost all Christians affirm the resurrection of the body, but few have speculated about what we might actually be doing with those bodies in the hereafter. Mormonism nourishes the idea that those bodies will be sources of strength and pleasure, of creation and procreation, of worship and marital sexual expression, all of which Bella experiences in her new state. Moreover, in Mormonism, resurrection occurs in the context of relationship, not aloneness. Bella enjoys her new body in the company of her immediate circle of Edward and Renesmee, but also in the bosom of her new family, the Cullens. A third and final theme woven into Meyer's fiction is her commitment to the theological principle of agency, a theme that is central to The Host, her adult novel. The Host has some funny Mormon trappings, which even my non-Mormon friends who have read the book picked up on. At one point, Wanderer, the parasitic soul who takes over Melanie's human body, is adamant that she has never refused a calling, and plenty of Latter-day Saints will recognize the archetypal frog in the boiling water analogy as an inside joke. There is even an apocalyptic Mormon survivalist ethos in the character of Jeb and Maggie, who eccentrically stockpile food and water and live separate from the power grid in the expectation that someday disaster will come. But a deeper Mormon theology undergirds the host even more explicitly than in the Twilight Saga. The character of Wanderer, who has experienced full lives on 7 different planets with many diverse hosts, provides a unique perspective on the contradictions of human life. On one hand, she is appalled by the atrocities of humanity, especially war and torture, but she is also inexplicitly drawn to the richness of human emotion. As Melanie's mind competes more and more effectively with her own, Wanderer briefly contemplates skipping out on her calling for an easier one, but she finds that other planets seem dull and unappealing after the complexity of human life, riddled with its many contradictions. This place was truly the highest and the lowest of all worlds, Wanderer reflects. It has the most beautiful senses, the most exquisite emotions, the most malevolent desires, the darkest deeds. Perhaps it was meant to be so. Perhaps without the lows, the highs could not be reached. I'm getting distracted for a second. Okay. In other words, it must needs be that there is an opposition in all things. Wanderer, who adopts the human name Wanda as she goes native, comes to realize that the harmonious existence she has always prized as a soul is a fallacy masking a hidden dystopia. Because the soul's lifestyle offers no choice, no true freedom, the surface beauty of the soul's civilization, which has eliminated war, pain, and disease, begins to disintegrate. It is a mere illusion. In contrast, the wild gorgeousness of humanity simply refuses to be snuffed out. Melanie's tenacious self-assertion stands in for humankind's refusal to accept anything less than all of it. The woolly mess of light and dark, good and evil, joy and despair. And in the end, it takes both Melanie's passion and Wanda's tranquil self-sacrifice to achieve the novel's resolution. Opposition is the key, ironically, to harmony and justice. Meyer's use of Mormon doctrine of agency is evidenced in the character of the Seeker, an ambitious and almost fanatical soul who believes she is doing humans a great favor by giving them perfection, assurance, and safety in exchange for their spirits. Any latter-day saint reader will recognize this ideology as Satan's ill-fated plan to save every person by removing even the possibility that they could choose anything other than God. In the novel, the Seeker plays the Lucifer role in some fairly obvious ways, dressing in nothing but black, pursuing Wanderer at every turn, seeking opportunities for self-aggrandizement, relishing her role as the god of this world, and loathing humanity and its emotions. In the novel's contempt for the Seeker, Meyer holds up human freedom as paramount, and any system that would deny that freedom, no matter how attractive it may seem on the surface, is deeply flawed. On the personal note, I have mixed feelings for Meyer's fiction. I find the theology intriguing and often beautiful, and her plots wonderfully imaginative, but she is correct when she assesses herself as a storyteller more than a writer. More than the technical problems in the writing, I find myself concerned about the retrogressive gender stereotypes in all of her novels, particularly the ineptitude of Bella. Although the novels repeatedly tell the reader that Bella is smart and strong, they repeatedly show her powerlessness. She passes out, she trips repeatedly, she is victimized 3 times in the first novel alone, only to be rescued by Edward. Worse than Bella's role as a damsel in distress is her disturbing tendency to blame herself for everything, expose herself to serious harm, take over all the homemaking chores for a father who seems incapable of the most rudimentary standards of self-care, and sacrifice everything for a man who is moody, unpredictable, and even borderline abusive. Many women readers will also be troubled by the extreme self-abasement of Wanda and the host, particularly one scene where she mutilates her own flesh, and another where she lies to protect the man who tried to murder her. These are themes I hope do not originate with Meyer's Mormonism. But while they are cause for concern, they do not mar the creative spirit and theological matrix of Meyer's work. Oh, that was the end. Oh, okay, cool. What's 7? What Girls Want, a series of vampire novels, illuminates the complexities of female adolescent desire. Flanagan also notes the fact that Meyer's novels gently evoke the girlhood of a more innocent age before MySpace, text messaging, and the celibate vacuity of Gossip Girl. It's definitely Gossip Girl, not Gossip Girls. Thank you. Can I read this? Or why did I Google it? Ow. Let's see. Maybe it was, it's called Wayback Machine. Maybe it was Wayback Machined. Oh, well, that's why. Damn, I guess we're not gonna read it. We'll read the first two paragraphs. Children's books about divorce, which are unanimously dedicated to bucking up those unfortunate little nippers whose families have gone belly up, ask a lot of their authors. The premise, however laudable, so defies the nature of modern children's literature, which, since the Victorian age, has centered on a sentimental portrayal of the happy, intact family, that the enterprise seems doomed from the title. Since the 1950s, children have delighted in the Little Bear books. Mother Bear, I never did forget your birthday, and I never will. But who wants to find a copy of Cornelia Maud Spellman's Mama and Daddy Bear's Divorce wedged onto the shelf? Still, the volumes fill a need, helping children understand that life on the other side of the custody hearing can still be happy and hopeful, that a broken family is not a ruined one. But pick up a novel written for adolescents in which the main character is a child of divorce, and you're in very different waters. Divorce in a young adult novel means what being orphaned meant in a fairy tale: vulnerability, danger, unwanted independence. Can I sci-hub this? Is that allowed? Give me this article, I want to read it. Dang it. Divorce in a young adult novel means what being orphaned meant in a fairy tale: vulnerability, danger, unwanted independence. It also means that the protagonists must confront the sexuality of their parents at the moment they least want to think about such realities. It introduces into a household the adult passions and jealousies that have long gone to ground in most middle-aged parents, a state of affairs that is particularly difficult for girls who have a more complicated attitude toward their own emerging sexuality than do boys, who are far more rooted in the domestic routines and traditions of their families, which constitute the vital link between the sweet cocooning of childhood and their impending departure from it. That is such an interesting beginning to a story about vampires. Oh my goodness, I want to read this. Guys, how do I get past the paywall? What's that sci-hub? Maybe next week I will have gotten through it and we can read it together or something. What Girls Want. Oh, that sounds so interesting. I was deep enough into, what does it say? This forbidden eroticism comes into play right in the beginning of vampire lore, with the nubile Lucy so willingly falling prey to Dracula's advances, and stretches all the way to the girl power heroine Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who falls for a vampire not once but twice. In the first instance, the sexual subtext comes explicit when, after consummating his relationship with Buffy and experiencing a moment of perfect happiness, Angel loses his fragile soul and becomes the evil vampire Angelus. In Buffy, as in Twilight, sexual expression can lead to death and monstrous destruction. Ooh. I was definitely deep enough into the fandom to read The Host. I had a copy. I don't think I have it anymore, but I was definitely one of the million of people who bought it. I liked it. I don't know enough about Mormonism or LDS except for that like Lifetime TV show. I think it was just like escape. It was like escaping cults or something. And I had like a group of like 3 or 4 women, early 20s-ish, who had enough contacts within like the LDS area that they knew of people who needed help getting out of there, and they would go over with like a truck and help them get like their luggage, like clothing and things they own, out through the window in the middle of the night when everyone's asleep. And then they would drive that person off to like the next state so nobody can, I don't know, follow them or something. It was like all legal somehow. It was wild. I was entranced, but it's also like a really hard thing to make into a TV show because you have to like have enough people who want to escape to fill an episode and then an entire season. You know, it's very much dependent upon people wanting to leave and trusting the people in the television show to actually help them. I'm sure like a lot of them didn't even want to be on television. I don't remember if anybody went around with like a blurred face or anything. Yeah. I remember liking the host. This is a very deep conversation, yes. I do remember liking the host a lot, but she was the main character, the main soul girl. It's been so long since I've read it, but she was very Bella. They were both like very timid. They didn't like speaking. Neither of those characters have ever liked speaking their mind or having any kind of confidence. I don't remember if they were both particularly clumsy, but I remember like beating up on themselves. I vaguely remember they mentioned like not tattling on a character who tried to kill them. It's crazy. Like that messed with my brain so much because I was already like kind of timid. I'm not good with talking to people. I'm very like socially anxious. So, you know, when I'm like modeling off through these characters and they're just letting everybody take advantage and hurt them because it's like, I don't know, the right thing to do for a teenage girl to just be small and pliant and anybody can hurt you, but as long as you forgive them, it's okay. You know, there's that mind fuck. Yeah, Jesus. I'm still trying to like pluck that out of my brain. Like they're little staples, and the staples are like, be pliant. Let people take advantage of you. It's okay if someone hurts you as long as you forgive them. And I'm just like prying them out of my skull in my 30s. Whew, that stuff is not healthy. Interesting take. I do not know enough about religion for these kinds of things to have a real discussion about them, but I appreciate reading and learning nonetheless. Moving on. Love Under Threat, the emotional valences of the Twilight Saga by Hetta Pryor-Honen. Sorry for that. That is definitely not how you pronounce that name. In Stephanie Meyer's Twilight, the first of the 4 volumes of the Twilight Saga, the heroine, Bella Swan, muses on the effect her mysterious classmate, Edward Cullen, has on her. His fingers were ice cold, but that wasn't why I jerked my hand away so quickly. When he touched me, it stung my hand as if an electric current had passed through us. These electrifying effects clearly are emotional. They call forth a physiological response in Bella that is based on changes in bodily expressions and action tendencies. These effects occur very fast and uncontrollably. Moreover, they make Bella aware that this meeting is significant to her life and well-being. Bella's infatuation with Edward is both exhilarating and perilous. She is obsessed with a man who may kill her any minute. She is enchanted and spellbound by Edward. His looks, voice, smell, touch, as well as his mind and talents. Sybil Baumbach defines such a response as fascination consisting of a mixture of wonder and admiration, as well as terror and trepidation. She argues that fascination is an emotion because it triggers physical effects in the body and immobilizes it. It also suspends rational decision-making, and combining attraction and danger, fascination is a seductive pleasure. Given that the Twilight Saga is a vampire romance, its every page is infused with emotion. In the romance novel genre, fascination provides the grounds for the romantic choice of a partner, a process involving a number of stable elements of the generic plot structure. Choice is slowly consolidated through these stages and turned into commitment. The generic conventions of romance shape, steer, and even dictate the emotions of characters. Lauren Berlant argues that all genres are distinguished by the effective contract they promise. Such a contract addresses both characters in the fictional world as well as implied in real-life readers. As its name indicates, the romance novel's generic contract centers on delivering an optimistic and reassuring experience of love. Typically, it promotes an idealizing script of the good life that combines intimate relationships with morals and economics. It advances enduring affection and emotionally fulfilling intimacy in couples and families. Moreover, it rewards such commitment with economic security. In placing my examination in the context of genre, I rely on Pamela Rege's formulation of the plot elements that shape the treatment of relationships in the romance novel. The Twilight Saga has an audience exceeding over 100 million readers. As John Cowoletti argues, bestsellers are typically viewed as fantasies shaped by the specific cultural and historical contexts of their production and consumption. According to this view, such cultural fantasies simultaneously express and evade components of readers' social and collective reality. They voice anxiety-provoking issues while at the same time providing fantasy resolutions to them. Ella Illouz has coined the term emotional style to describe various linguistic, scientific, and interactional techniques to apprehend and manage the emotions these fantasies call forth. Such techniques address the ways in which we organize our emotions concerning the self and its relation to others, as well as imagining the self's potentialities. They play a key role in structuring the fantasies bestsellers convey. Berlant specifies that cultural fantasies in general strive to express conventional scripts for the good life. They promote persistence in pursuing the activities spelled out in the scripts of these fantasies as a means of achieving the good life. It is in this sense that they are infused with optimism. These fantasies promise to enable readers to attain the satisfying something needed to establish a meaningful relationship to the world that they cannot generate on their own. This nebulous something, for example, an emotion, a thing, a circumstance, or a characteristic, provides the fantasizer with the missing piece that would allow her to achieve the fullness of the good life script. Berlant argues, however, that many of our cherished cultural fantasies have become self-defeating and that they no longer feed a genuine sense of optimism. That is, they cannot inscribe and sustain a hopeful view of personal and collective transformation towards which subjects strive. Instead, they are infused with cruel optimism. What we desire actually turns into an obstacle to our flourishing. The objects that incited our attachment actively impede the aims that brought us to them initially. In this essay, I examine how the Twilight Saga's notion of love is linked with its emotional style. I treat emotional style as primarily addressing the various ways in which romance novel conventions manage emotions. I analyze this style from 3 different perspectives. First, I examine the characters' moments of fascinations as gateways to the concept of love on which the saga relies. Second, I pay attention to the most typical motifs of romance in order to demonstrate how they organize and shape the representation of emotions. I ponder the degree to which these motifs still are capable of sustaining the genre's optimism about intimate relationships. Finally, I consider how these representations are linked with our contemporary understanding of love. Throughout, I draw on romance genre research and analyses of the changing historical and socio-cultural contexts of love. Love as thrilling magnetism. Damn, okay. We're getting into it. The 8 indispensable elements of the romance novel are in place in the Twilight Saga. The initial state of the society, the meeting of hero and heroine, the attraction between them, the declaration of love, the barriers to their union, the point of ritual death, when the union seems impossible, the recognition of the means to overcome the barrier, and the betrothal. These scenes may take place in any order. They may be multiplied, repeated, merged together, or reduced. Moreover, as the genre favors passionate heroines, readers are expected to experience vicariously what the 17-year-old protagonist narrator Bella is going through. 3 elements often employed in the beginning of the romance novel, the initial state of society, the meeting, and the attraction, demonstrate how fascination shapes Bella's relationship with Edward. At the start, both the community and characters desire change, and this is the stage that first inscribes the optimistic stance of the romance genre. The coveted change is associated with culturally scripted fantasies of the good life. Bella's family is dysfunctional. Her divorced parents are incapable of supporting her emotionally or financially. Given the Swan family's modest finances, whatever future Bella wants to have, she must carve it out for herself. As for Edward Cullen, he believes that being a vampire equals being damned. He is convinced that life no longer holds happiness for him. From the communal perspective, there is an ancient violent conflict between vampires and the local Quillet tribe who metamorphose into werewolves. This strife is revived when the Cullen family of vampires settles permanently in Forks. Consequently, the saga's opening describes a setting in which change is needed. The situation turns the meeting of the primary couple into an intense experience, as is seen in the following excerpts. I was consumed by the mystery Edward presented, and more than a little obsessed by Edward himself. About 3 things I was absolutely positive. First, Edward was a vampire. Second, there was a part of him, and I didn't know how potent that part might be, that thirsted for my blood. And third, I was unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. Oh man, that second quote, that ran my life for a while. I wanted it tattooed on my forehead. Typically, the stage opens up possibilities for the primary couple. Because the Cullens have a good social standing and are cultured and rich, dating Edward promises personal growth, a supporting familial context, and upward mobility for Bella. Although Bella repeatedly protests that she is not interested in the accoutrement of the Cullen lifestyle, nevertheless, the emotions Edward calls forth in her are inextricably linked with these prospects. No wonder, then, that a physical and mental magnetism keeps Bella riveted with Edward. In particular, Edward's charisma draws Bella to him. Baumbach explains that charisma is a personal magnetism, an exceptional quality of an individual personality, suggesting that he or she is gifted with supernatural, superhuman, or extraordinary powers or qualities. This description is literal in Edward's case because he is a supernatural and superhuman creature. This specific characteristic is tied up with the optimistic fantasy script of the romance novel because when the charismatic person evokes fascination, the experience changes the admirer. This person feels magically transformed and elevated, her imagination aroused. She sees visions of gods, supernatural creatures, mythic events. Again, this feature is literal as Edward opens up a supernatural world for Bella. Therefore, we need to consider what role the promise of a supernatural metamorphosis plays in the optimistic fantasy of the Twilight Saga. The real possibility of being killed by Edward entices Bella. He could accidentally destroy her simply by hugging her. This feature ties in with fascination in that it is a borderline experience. Fascination arises from the combination of 2 opposing forces and marks the concurrent awakening of deep attraction and intense repulsion. Danger keeps the grander scale of things in Bella's view. This element of deathly danger accounts for Bella's intensive emotional engagement. Edward resembles the Byronic hero in that his threatening nature makes him much more interesting and enticing than any conventional suitor. The Twilight Saga illustrates practices and values of courtship and marriage that are intimately linked with the concepts of love. It is worth noticing that Bella denies that love in any way involves a choice. Love didn't work that way, I decided. Once you cared about a person, it was impossible to be logical about them anymore. At another point, she muses that love is irrational. The more you love someone, the less sense anything made. Portraying falling in love as overwhelming and irrational fascination subscribes to an age-old model of so-called enchanted love that, according to Louise, consists of the following features. Enchanted love is experienced as a unique event, which erupts brutally and unexpectedly in one's life. It is inexplicable and irrational, and it operates as a deep commotion of the soul. This type of love is also felt to be fateful in the sense that you cannot choose it. It chooses you even against your will. Fascination and enchanted love are not the same, but they are united by the intensity of the subject's emotional experience. Such an emotion is part and parcel of the romance novel's optimism, for intensity guarantees its genuineness. This encounter takes over the body as well as stymieing the senses and reason. The love object is unique and definitively beyond comparison. Definitely beyond comparison. The force of the emotions calls forth a willingness in the lover to sacrifice oneself for the love object. Fascination differs from enchanted love in that the dangers it evokes are always real. This danger rivets the fascinated subject, making him or her determined to face the threats of the object embeds. In the Twilight Saga, this face-off with the deadly menace of fascination potentially transports Bella into another ontological realm, for she would remain alive as a vampire. Thus her death would include loss, but also the possibility of a new beginning, another feature that fits the optimism of the generic script. In the romance genre, fascination leads to the declaration of love stage, the placement of which varies. Given that the Twilight Saga relies on the love at first sight model, this stage takes place early on. No matter where it is placed, this stage centers on the act of choosing, even despite what the protagonist may claim. As was already stated, Bella thinks her infatuation lies outside rationality and choice. Yet, Louise stresses that attraction, passion, and love cannot be culturally and socially shaped, because our context always affects these emotions in multiple ways. She explains that what she calls the architecture of romantic choice is a cultural mechanics that steers us in our evaluation of the love subject. The ways in which we draw on our emotions, knowledge, and reasoning in perceiving a potential love object, as well as in decision-making, are organized by this architecture. Such consultation shows that the socio-cultural environment systematizes even our most intimate choices. The architecture of romantic choice is framed by the ecology of romantic choice, that is, the social environment that steers us to make certain kinds of choices. Today, this ecology emphasizes choice as a category of an individual's cognition, and self-reflection. Because we hold that we realize our individuality in the act of choosing a love object. This act is proof of our freedom, rationality, and autonomy. It is a right and a form of competence. Fascination places the fascinated subject in between conceptual categories. It makes him or her waver between categories, making the act of choosing difficult. Such a state feeds into the barrier stage of the romance novel. As a generic element, the barrier refers to a series of scenes at different points providing either internal or external reasons, or both, why the protagonist cannot establish a permanent relationship. As regards the ecology and architecture of romantic choice, these difficulties are revealing of the socio-cultural room for maneuver of choice. They are especially tangible whenever the heroine has more than one suitor to select from. Making a choice plays a weighty role in romance novels because the heroine must distinguish the right suitor from the wrong one. So it is in the Twilight Saga, too, for besides the vampire Edward, also the werewolf Jacob woos Bella. Barriers turn into impasses. The obstacles of the romance plot place intimate relationships in a context surpassing the individual. They may deal with any psychological problem or any economic, social, cultural, familial, or geographic circumstance. The conventions of the romance novel favor pitting two men as rivals for the same moment and vice versa. These male and female foils of hero and heroine illustrate rejected character traits as well as negative relationship models. Hence, a typical feature of the barrier is the heroine's challenge to distinguish among the suitors the right one. The character foils, however, do not always provide genuine triangular relationships because the rival is often an obviously weaker alternative. In the Twilight Saga, Edward meets his match in the werewolf Jacob. They are true rivals, as the division of the audience into Team Edward and Team Jacob as the right decision for Bella illustrates. Unlike Edward, Jacob is of a sunny disposition, friendly and easygoing. By being kind, loyal, and attentive, Jacob kindles Bella's feelings, making her ponder whether she should choose him. Significantly, Jacob also evokes fascination, for in his werewolf form he is gorgeous, strong and fast, but also unpredictable and quick-tempered. His wolf brother, Sam, exemplifies what a werewolf may do once his emotions fuel up. Sam has badly disfigured his beloved's face in the heat of the moment. I have a little bit of an issue with this, where, like, the audience is very Team Edward, Team Jacob, and I felt the same way. Bella very clearly will always choose, like, there's no doubt ever, honestly. The only doubt of whether or not she would choose Jacob is when Edward is physically not near her. And even then, she's hallucinating him. She was always going to choose Edward. She was always going to choose her hallucinations of Edward over happiness with Jacob. It was always an illusion. If anything, it was us being like, yeah, but Jacob's like her age and cute, and Edward isn't around. Maybe she could date him. I think it's the audience's like projecting onto Bella. I don't think he was ever truly a choice. Anyway, whatever. Though I suppose, I mean, he was always like pining after her. He was always like, I just want Bella to love me back, until he got a toddler to fall in love with. So maybe also Jacob was pushing Team Jacob, but it was never an option, truly. Anyway, let me drink some water. In the saga, the barrier is grounded in ontological difference, requiring that Bella negotiate between such categories as human/inhuman, human/animal, mortal/immortal, spirit/flesh, and salvation/damnation. These combinations of allure and danger affect Bella's choice-making. Fascination's element of danger implies that she may be fatally mistaken about the character of the love object. Both suitors might unintentionally kill Bella. If she chooses Jacob, she will have to live with that threat for the rest of her life, for werewolves are impulsively violent. If she chooses Edward, and if Edward bites her with the intention of changing her into a vampire, there is nothing to guarantee the success of this measure. With both men, Bella will have to keep secret the real character of her partner, hiding large sections of her life from ordinary humans. What Bella makes clear, however, is that no ordinary guy will do for her. While the romance novel conventions invariably paint the romantic hero in idealizing colors, it is nevertheless significant that the Twilight Saga rejects a human male as a potential partner. To be sure, this preference is in keeping with the genre of fantasy, but it nevertheless raises the question of whether only supernatural creatures are able to sustain the optimism of romance. Because Edward holds that vampirism means the loss of one's soul and damnation, he forsakes Bella in New Moon. He wants to save her from himself. Obviously, terminating the relationship forms an insurmountable barrier, one that leads to the element of ritual death. Regis defines the latter as the point where there seems to be no means to lift the obstacles, and hence the union of the couple appears impossible. The Twilight Saga combines the barrier and ritual death elements together. After Edward forsakes Bella, she slides into a catatonic state, as is evidenced by the 4 chapters running from October to January with no text of any kind. Let me tell you, those 4 pages changed my brain chemistry forever. Man, the idea of time passing just as one word on a page blew my mind. The drama, the intrigue, the despair. Oh, tasty. Significantly, the barrier stage acquires tones of what Berlant calls an impasse, deriving from the profound crisis that entails bearing an extended vulnerability for an undetermined duration. As there seems to be no way out, the crisis situation slowly changes into a daily routine. In the romance novel, the obliteration of the barrier is linked with recognition, that is, new information making the desired union possible. This element includes any number of things that the heroine recognizes, ranging from changed external circumstances to growth as a person. In New Moon, the abandoned Bella hears Edward's voice in her head whenever she is in danger. In order to make him speak to her, she jumps off a cliff, only to be saved by Jacob. Bella's suicidal jump makes Edward consult the Volturi, a law-instituting group of vampires. Whew. I almost had a sneeze about killing him. Oh, I almost sneezed. Bella, however, saves Edward's life at the last minute. These multiple brushes with death lead to the recognition element that she experiences as an epiphany. It is Bella's manipulation of the internalized image of Edward that eventually leads to the events enabling this realization. Thus, the love relationship would not develop if it were not for her provocation. Edward loved me. The bond forged between us was not one that could be broken by absence, distance, or time. As I would always belong to him, so would he always be mine. You love me, I marveled. The sense of conviction and rightness washed through me again. Again, changed my fucking brain chemistry. And I want to make that point clear again. Like, there's no reason for me to argue this so strongly, but I still maintain that there was never a chance for Jacob. She literally threw herself off of a cliff, chasing after Edward. She would have just killed herself chasing after him. He was never on the table. We play around with it because it keeps the books going and because Jacob's such a fun character. I'm personally team Jacob, but I kind of view Bella as one of those bicycles. She could date anybody and I'd be fine with it. I think my favorite relationship possibility in Twilight is Rosalie and Leah. Something about those two girls just being butch and fun together. It's just like they're both the mean girls. I want them to be mean but in love with each other. Unrelated. Anyway, Bella's epiphany diffuses her sense of inferiority that forms a key internal obstacle. She understands that fascination and enchanted love surpass the individual, enabling her to rise above whatever personal shortcomings she has. In accordance with the optimistic script of the romance genre, the goal of love is elevation and transcendence. Yet, in spite of this newfound conviction, the barrier between the couple is not lifted. Bella's father is strongly against Edward. The Volturi now form a dangerous threat, as do also the werewolves. But most importantly, the ongoing bickering and disputes between Edward and Bella poses a barrier. Not only do these remaining barrier elements anchor the saga in the contemporary ecology and architecture of romantic choice, but also they imply that barriers are on the point of permanently turning into impasses. While the notion of a barrier implies a temporarily finite state, an impasse presents an unsurmountable dead end. In an impasse, agents must come up with new means of dealing with the confounding situation. What characterizes this situation is that there is no going back to what was before, but neither is there the possibility of overcoming the impasse. What do characters do in situations that test their potential for achieving the good life expressed in the romantic script? Negotiating love and making compromises. Bella's epiphany about mutual commitment takes place early in the saga, in its second volume. Even so, their relationship continues to be plagued by discord and insecurity. That the couple continues to have issues suggests that things have not reached a generically satisfactory point. Instead, the crisis situation persists. The following example provides a typical illustration of moments of disharmony between Bella and Edward. This scene takes place in eclipse and thus much later than Bella's epiphany. It comes much later than her epiphany. Edward's face was hard and his posture tense. He glared at me wordlessly. Bella, he whispered, do you have any idea how close I came to crossing the line today? Do you know what that would have meant? He ground his teeth together. His hands were balled up in fists at his sides. He was still standing against the wall, and I hated the space between us. The couple's quarrels repeatedly addressed the same subjects, such as the vampire strife with the werewolves, the danger posed by the Volturi, the presence of Jacob in Bella's life, and the ontological difference between the lovers. Edward acts patronizingly and coercively, insisting that his actions stem from protectiveness. Bella repeatedly defies the rules Edward imposes, even escaping from his home to meet Jacob. When Edward left her, she learned to love Jacob, and in Eclipse, she begs him to kiss her even after she has committed herself to Edward. Today, two independent emotional selves must repeatedly renew the reasons and the emotional conditions defining why they started their relationship. The discord requires that Bella and Edward continually revisit these reasons. Their arguments also concern the reciprocity and symmetry of the relationship because of the discrepancy between them, not only in economic and social standing, as well as age. Edward's life as a vampire has lasted over 100 years, but also in ontological status. Bella is adamant that only becoming a vampire will create equality and emotional equity. Until then, Edward always has the upper hand. Moreover, Bella interprets Edward's refusal to transform her as his unwillingness to commit fully to the relationship. Louise explains that especially women worry about achieving a stable, intimate relationship because they find men emotionally elusive and routinely resisting long-term commitments. These negotiations, arguments, and compromises between Bella and Edward turn love into an object of endless investigation and self-scrutiny. Berlinger identifies the conversation as a narrative motif designed to handle moments during which characters search for means of adjustment and look for modes of living on. This motif is thus one means of dealing with the impasse. Bella and Edward have ongoing discussions about desires, needs, and goals. Although Louise does not consider her feelings within the same theoretical framework as Berlinger, it is significant that she too names conversations, negotiations, and making compromises as the vehicles through which men and women manage intimacy and love relationships. While love relationships still in the 19th century stress the spouse's ability to play their marital roles successfully, feeling and expressing the emotions attached to these roles, Louise claims that expectations have changed considerably in our day. The negotiations exhibit the contemporary ideal that intimacy include verbal disclosures of emotions and the active sharing these emotions with a partner. These disclosures reveal and lay bare the lovers' emotional selves so that they get support and recognition, while simultaneously safeguarding their individuality and freedom. Such negotiations show self-awareness, ability to identify and name feelings, talk about them, and emphasize with each other's position. These listed features, fitting the desires and goals of two separate individuals, achieving reciprocity and symmetry, engaging in self-reflection and negotiating how to meet each other's needs, figure as hallmarks of the contemporary architecture of choice. It is through such measures that individuals arrive at a decision about who fits them as partner the best. They are indications of what Louise calls emotional intelligence, which plays a key role in romantic choice. In pinpointing the same narrative motif of conversation, both Berlinger and Louise highlight the large amounts of emotional work that goes into sustaining intimacy. As this motif does not address talk where one settles things once and for all, but an ongoing, constant series of discussions, it suggests that romantic relationships are repeatedly threatened by barriers and even impasses. Therefore, they need steady vigilance in order to stay intact. Together, these features imply that the capacity of the romance novel to sustain optimism is currently weakening. The Twilight Saga resorts to extreme means in order to salvage the optimism of the romance genre. What is notable is that the generic structures and conventions of romance alone are not enough to provide a means out of the impasse. The saga employs both fantasy and vampire gothic genres in order to rescue the romantic relationship. Consequently, the terms in which the impasse between Bella and Edward is reworked into an obstacle that can be overcome recontextualize the love relationship by making it address the binary of human/inhuman. Only by opting for vampirism and superhumanity can Bella put the anxieties concerning love to rest, saving the romantic relationship. Many romance novels conclude with nuptials. From a generic perspective, Bella and Edward's marriage ought to mark the pinnacle of their love. In the Twilight Saga, however, this conventional crowning element of commitment supplies a new barrier. Bella insists that the couple have sex during their honeymoon while she is still in her human form. Edward manages not to kill her, but his passionate lovemaking leaves Bella badly bruised. Consequently, he wants no more sex, at least not until they both are vampires. Things deteriorate between the couple when it transpires that the newlywed Bella is pregnant with a half-human, half-vampire child. Edward wants her to abort it because the fetus threatens her life. Hence, even this event that consolidates the relationship in the romance novel turns into a further obstacle. By refusing abortion, Bella is ready to die for the child. Also, she continues to hope that giving birth will compel Edward to metamorphose her in spite of the risks. Edward performs an emergency C-section, but Bella's heart stops beating. In order not to lose her, Edward stabs her heart with his venom and bites her all over her body. It was like he was kissing her, brushing his lips at her throat, at her wrists, into the crease at the inside of her arm. But I could hear the lush tearing of her skin as his teeth bit through again and again, forcing venom into her system at as many points as possible. I saw his pale tongue sweep along the bleeding gashes. Edward finally fully commits himself to Bella by transforming her when she is no more than a horridly mangled corpse. What is remarkable in this scene is its gruesomeness, which moves the narrative into the realm of the vampire gothic. The child breaks Bella's spine, her stomach is slashed open, she is bathed in blood, and bit all over by a vampire. With narratives of fascination, remarks Baumbach, readers are usually granted a shelter of safe spectership, enabling them to immerse themselves in the allure of fascination and to stay insulated from its dangers. Because Jacob narrates the scene, readers are provided with some distance to its violent nature. As Rachel Dubois observes, the uncertainty about Bella's fate is resolved when she finally wakes up, a painful transformation process that has turned her into a vampire. As a human, I'd never been best at anything. After 18 years of mediocrity, I was pretty used to being average. I was amazing now, to them and to myself. It was like I had been born to be a vampire. I had found my true place in the world, the place I fit, the place I shined. Bella's reference to shining reveals that she now has the personality, looks, and sexiness with which to impress others. Her new gorgeous body is made for evoking desire as well as giving and receiving pleasure, qualities that play a greater role in securing a relationship than before. Significantly, once the lovers are ontologically the same, all tensions vanish, and they need neither to negotiate anything nor make compromises. Instead, from the moment of Bella's metamorphosis, the couple is seamlessly united into one. The couple's concord is crowned when Bella finally lets Edward read her mind as proof of her love. Dubois observes that Bella's metamorphosis marks a breach with readers, for after it, Bella no longer functions as a site of narrative and physical possibility for them. She becomes alien, an other. I have argued elsewhere that what this means for the romance script is that the end vaporizes fascination. The Twilight Saga unties the knot between danger and death and thus empties out its strongest emotional source. With the shared ontological status of the lovers, the enticing danger vanishes and is replaced by vapid, soft, pornographic allusions to continual great sex. The dissolution of the fascinating tension becomes apparent in the manner the saga changes track after Bella's transformation. The latter part of the expansive fourth volume, Breaking Dawn, deals with the strife between the vampires called the Volturi and the Cullen clan, supported by the werewolf allies of Jacob's Kulet tribe. It moves into the terrain of the family saga, while establishing a benevolent communal context for Bella's vampire family motivates the shift. The fact remains Nevertheless, that it pushes the saga's primary romance relationship into the background. While a happily ever after conclusion is part and parcel of the romance novel document, the Twilight's couple's union will literally last forever. Here, the saga departs from its conventional counterparts. Consider, for example, Jane Austen, whom Regis characterizes as the master of the romance novel. Austen invariably places her romantic couples in a larger communal context, drawing attention to an array of various types of marriages. In Pride and Prejudice, the happy unions of Elizabeth and Darcy and Jane and Bingley are contrasted with the quarrelsome marriages of Lydia and Wickham, as well as Elizabeth's parents. The rational marriage of Charlotte Lucas to the intolerable Mr. Collins provides a further reminder of the realities of adult life. By marrying Bella off to a supernatural creature, however, the Twilight Saga rejects the human dimension of intimate relationships. It is as if the long-term crises and the various impasses Bella and Edward encounter could not be resolved in any other than a superhuman way. If we regard genres as affective contracts, as Berlinger does, then the Twilight Saga suggests that the romance genre alone no longer provides as satisfying a vehicle of desire as before. The genre's ability to provide continuity in the reader's belief in the possibilities and promises of life has become defective. Interestingly, even the scant descriptions of vampire married life suggest that this ending opens the door to boredom. Only Carlisle, the patriarch of the Cullen family, has a meaningful occupation as a doctor. Edward and his siblings study indifferently, lounge around, have great sex, as well as shopping and consuming high fashion and gadgets. Thanks to Alice Cullen's ability to look into the future, the family's investments secure great wealth. The consumer society script of the good life is roundly fulfilled. Furthermore, the saga turns the ideal of commitment into eternal love. Consequently, stability turns into stasis and immovability. There is no need for any kind of growth. Brendan Shee observes that romantic love is not capable of providing meaning over unending repetition and time stretching to near infinity because our capacity to love arises from our vulnerability and immortality. It is the limited character of our lives that makes our desires and purposes meaningful. Interesting. Let us now put our finger on the main features of the Twilight Saga's emotional style. Doing so enables us to be more precise about its fantasy nature. I have argued that in its reliance on the generic stages of the romance novel, the saga constructs a double emotional structure. It expresses a longing for love and sexuality that do not produce anxiety, negotiation, and uncertainty. It promotes the notion that readers should tenaciously believe in love in order to achieve it in their lives. In so doing, it insists that love still is a worthy cause. On the one hand, fascination allows characters and readers to express longing for enchanted love that is based on self-sacrifice, fusion, and affirmation of absolutes. Enchanted love speaks to us because it implies transcendence of the mundane human condition. Its appeal is tinged with nostalgia, for, as Eloise remarks, we no longer can sustain belief in this type of love, neither can we feel the emotions appropriate to it. Instead, the rationalization of our approach to love has spread deep-seated disappointment. Yet we still yearn for a sense of the sacred and the capacity to believe, because disenchantment has meant that the mystery of love has become disparaged and meaningless. On the other hand, fascination based on the dangers of dating a vampire unleashes just those anxieties that are familiar from contemporary life. Today, the criteria for mate selection are more diverse than ever, and they have become integrated into the private dynamics of individual taste. Like us, Bella can only rely on herself in choosing a partner, and this choice results from a complex process of emotional and cognitive evaluation. Consequently, the Twilight Saga enables readers to experience contradictory emotional valences, longing for and belief in an outdated mode of love, together with contemporary insecurities and anxieties about the challenges of romantic choice. That the saga's emotional style enables contradictory emotional valences arises from its nature as a cultural fantasy. Louise remarks that such a fantasy presents and distorts reality. It incorporates reality, defends the self against reality, and yet helps one live with it. Fantasy affirms and denies the emotions and concepts on which it rests. This double emotional structure is of such a nature that it embeds both explicit and hidden instructions readers can take away from the reading experience. Perhaps luckily, becoming a vampire is not among the suggested options. Yet, the protagonist Bella does function as key to what is offered as a useful carryover for readers. The character of Bella could perhaps best be described as a manager of emotions. She is capable of using language in order to express her inner self. It is in this sense that she has a great deal of emotional intelligence. What this means is that, for her, language provides a tool for making sense of difficult emotions which she can then communicate to Edward. As Louise remarks, contemporary culture prizes language because it enables couples to construct a narrative of verbal intimacy that they can share and use to enhance this intimacy further. In fact, this advice is in line with present-day therapeutic self-help manuals that emphasize the injunction to share needs and feelings as a significant factor in sustaining and fostering love in a relationship. It is notable that this ideal of communication aimed at managing emotions and instituting emotional control privileges women's selfhood and perspective. It empowers women readers by attributing to them the capacity to carry on relationships according to fair procedures of speech, but also burdens them heavily with the responsibility for doing so. Finally, the saga's double emotional structure allows for two ways of reading. It enables readers' hold on the optimism of the romance novel. Hence, provides what Berlinger calls a cluster of promises that sustain hope in enduring, intimate relationships. Yet, because only a supernatural transformation finally saves the romantic relationship, readers may also see the saga as heralding a situation of cruel optimism. The notion of love it promotes no longer provides tools for envisioning a good life. Damn, that was a good ending. Okay, interesting. I was intrigued by that entire thing. Ooh. Let me drink something. Bibliography. Adventure, mystery, and romance, formula stories as art and popular culture. Coming to a violent end, narrative closure in the death drive in Stephanie Meyer's Twilight series. What? I have to look some of these up. I love reading the bibliography. Okay. We've been doing this long enough, I believe. Time to say good night and goodbye, and we will probably, I'm pretty sure I'll go back to the Dracula's Brood reading next week, because we still have half of a book to get through. But as we were reading this, I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if we took time to study like the Gothic genre in general, because, you know, vampires are based on the Gothic literature, and they kept saying the Byronic hero, the Byronic heroine, which is an intriguing concept that people may not understand, and why not read a little bit more into it one day, maybe by when next time we take a break on the book. Who knows? We'll see. But I do these streams every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, allowing for my computer to be working and I don't have to dust it. Assuming Medusa isn't being terrible. She's down there sleeping for once. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, especially if you made it to the end. Oh my god, thank you so much. But I hope you enjoyed reading and learning, and I will always love that. So it's always going to be a part of any kind of YouTube-y thing that I do. I hope you do too. I'm repeating myself. Okay, I will see you guys next week. Thank you and good night. Bye.